Welcome, everyone, to today's ACLS webinar presentation. George Hoezelman, the current president of ACLS, is our speaker for today. He's a liturgical artist working mostly in wood, but he also does painting and metal, and he's a liturgical consultant. Lives in Arkansas, is a Benedictine oblate and a Knight of the Holy Sepulcher. His academic background includes advanced studies in medieval art, history, early modern history, philosophy, religion, and psychology. He is pursuing a Masters of Theological Studies at St. John University. He got started in his career in the late 80s, like many of us did, carving Stations of the Cross for St. Augustine in North Little Rock, Arkansas. This first major commission won him a Bene Award and set him on the path that he's followed ever since. Today, he's going to focus on two sets of door panels and explore the theology, typology, and interactive symbolism, which results in the images which invite contemplative reflection on the sacred. Welcome, George.
Oh, thank you very much, Pam. Yes, we're going to look at a couple of sets of doors, one in El Dorado, Arkansas, Holy Redeemer Catholic Church, and the other one at Holy Trinity Episcopal Church in Fayetteville, North Carolina. The doors, these were both done, I forget the exact years, but they have an extensive theological and typological plan that is designed to draw a viewer in and see something new every time they spend time with it. And that's the operative phrase, spending time with it. One of the passages in the old Environment, Art, and Catholic Worship from the bishops of the United States, it said that quality is perceived only through contemplation. And there's a lot of truth in that. If you can spend time in front of a set of images or a single image and discover something new and insightful spiritually every time you look at it, that's real liturgical art, real sacred art. Too often we find art that's purely decorative, just put up on the wall to look prettier, make it look more like a church or something, whatever that reputedly means. So we'll start first with this set of doors at Holy Redeemer in El Dorado. The pastor at the time was a Benedictine monk from Subiaco, Arkansas, the monastery that I had studied for back in the day. And he had some symbolic ideas rooted in 1st and 2nd Corinthians. And he, because I've got background in medieval art history, he was talking about something along the stylistic lines of, say, Bernvard's bronze door at Hildesheim and some other of these medieval, and I'm like, I'm all there for that. I love that particular style, that early Romanesque 11th century style. And so what we came up with, I think I departed pretty far from Corinthians, but it winds up being interactive bottom to top as well as left to right. The left door are scenes depicting and referencing the human side of Christ, the human nature, etc. On the right side, it emphasizes his divinity. And together they form the entrance. Well, let's go back to this particular space, and we'll see that here in a second. On the humanities side, we'll start at the very bottom, and we'll see in these particular images how they relate side to side. At the very bottom, we have the fall and the promise of a redeemer. Christ has his foot on the serpent there, Can you see that cursor? Yeah. You've got the tree, and it's got the bad fruit of disobedience or arrogance or whatever you want to call it. And Adam and Eve turn away from the Creator. But then the promised Redeemer turns to God. Uh, we don't want to get into any kind of monophysitism or anything like that with seeing this as somehow subordinate to the Father or anything. But this is, the Messiah in his humanity uh, undoes the disobedience of Adam through his own obedience and thus crushes the head of the serpent. Across from it is the anastasis, or in Western parlance, the harrowing of hell. And what we have here is the tree of life again, with full foliage and everything. Seven, actually they're copper, but seven shiny new good fruit representing the sacraments. 3 of initiation and 4 of life in the church. And in the Eastern tradition, the resurrection, the anastasis, is depicted as Christ redeeming Adam and Eve from the abyss. And in this case, the pastor wanted some sort of reference to the medieval concept of the abyss, hell, whatever, as being this maw of the damned. And so we've got this monster here, and the little eye at the bottom. Well, let's go back. The eye at the bottom is a glass eye for alligator taxidermy. So there's that. Moving up one panel, this promise of a redeemer comes to fruition in the nativity. You got the 3 kings there, and the angel, and Mary, and the Christ child. Opposite it is, it's deliberately intended to kind of bookend each other. The 3 Marys at the tomb. Christ comes in his humanity, and he rises from the dead, demonstrating his divinity. Now, the other thing about these two is, as you can see right there in the middle, is one of the door handles. And so you have to, these are about eye level. And so you grab the handle of these revelatory moments, the empty tomb and the nativity, and this opens the doors into the main body of the church. And so you can read into that what you will. Moving up another level, we have the Holy Family on the left, Christ, Mary, Joseph, doing a bit of carpentry there. One of my brothers saw this, and he said, I think I bought that hammer down at the co-op last week. But so that's his human family. And as we know in the gospel there, Christ reveals the nature of his eschatological family when he's confronted with his human family, questioning his sanity at one point. And so on the right, we have the ascension and basically the inauguration of the eschatological family, which is the church. And so we've got 4 figures down there. And let's see what we got next. And then at the very top 2 panels, on the left, of course, is the crucifixion, very traditional approach in a Romanesque style, early Romanesque. And on the right, the triumphant Christ the King, Christ the ruler of all things, Christ the Pantocrator. That is the ultimate end of all things. Let's see. Now, let's move to this set of doors. This is Trinity Episcopal in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And this was a particularly interesting project. To give you a sense of scale, which I should have included a photograph of people with this, but I didn't. Each panel is 3 feet by 3 feet. Each door leaf is 6 feet wide and 16 feet tall. The pastor of this particular church was very proud of the fact that the doors of his church, which seats about 800, are larger than the entry doors on the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. And he never tired of letting people know that. So these are pretty substantial panels. The parish had generated a list of biblical references that they considered in some way, shape, or form referencing the Trinity, whether it was one person of the Trinity or the whole Trinity together. They felt that in some way it referenced the Trinity, but they had no order, no plan, nothing. It's just a list. So it fell to me to sort through all this and come up with a theological plan that would communicate more than just decorating the doors. And what we have here is the exterior of the doors. There's 6 more panels on the interior. One of the interesting things about this is, you design 12 panels and it doesn't happen all at once. I came up with a concept and then I started doing the drawings and sending them to them about 2, 3 at a time. And I had sent them 4 drawings and got word back that they had already gotten donations for all 12 panels. I said, whoa, we don't even have the designs done yet. I said, doesn't matter. Everybody liked what we saw so far, so keep going. So what we have outside, as you approach the door, and let's look at these doors open here. There we go. I'm just mirroring the photograph there so you can see all 12 of them in some way. On the right side, let's start with the left side. These doors represent hospitality, various scenes that they chose that represent hospitality, but also could in some way refer to the Trinity. At the very bottom, this one is Abraham with the 3 visitors at the Oak of Mamre, which is sometimes used as a reference to the Trinity because there's 3 visitors. And the one says he'll return in a year has traditionally been seen as a reference to Christ. That, of course, brings us to the actual image of the incarnation here, the 3 kings, 3 magi at the nativity of Christ. The interesting thing about this particular panel, and the reason I've got it larger, is when we were doing the installation on these, this Episcopal church has a huge labyrinth, which kind of ties us into last month's webinar. But they've got a beautiful labyrinth on the floor and movable seating. So during the week, they move the seating back so that people from surrounding areas and other churches and communities can come in and do the labyrinth, etc. And they host a number of groups from different churches around the community. One of which is a group of Lutheran women. And I had gone to lunch. Most of the panels were still laying on a table, and 2 or 3 were up. And I come back, and this woman comes up to me, and she's weeping. I mean, she's in tears. And she said, "Did you carve these?" I said, "Yes." She said, "I want you to know how much this image of Mary with baby Jesus means." Apparently, it was a support group for women who had lost a child, and this particular image just moved her profoundly. And that's what that's the goal, and it's a stunning thing when that happens, and it's profoundly moving and meaningful when somebody relates to a piece of work and are so connected to it and to God through it that they're moved to tears. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing. At the very top, of course, is Christ feeding the multitude, the 5 loaves and 2 fish. Once again, showing hospitality. Although I did discover that I am allergic to the wood that I carve the fish from which I carve the fish. I chose a species of wood called lace wood. Sometimes it's called snake wood because it has a scaly pattern to it. Thought that would look good for fish, and it does. Except that the dust makes me break out like I've been swimming in poison ivy, so I won't be doing that again. The opposite side are a series of theophanies, manifestations of God in multiple languages. At the very bottom, we have Moses uh, encountering the burning bush, and I incorporated the Hebrew name for God into the flames. Christ on the cross with the Latin inscription. And then at the very top, Christ the Pantocrator, Christ the All Ruler, uh, with the Greek for I am, which takes us back down to the bottom uh, with the manifestation or the revelation through the burning bush. And so we're invited to hospitality and reminded of hospitality for those that need it. And the doors open us to the divine presence. Now, inside the church, we have we have a whole lot of stuff going on in here, including some things that I didn't know about until later. The only set of panels that goes top to bottom instead of bottom to top are these on the left here. And it represents creation, the promise of the Redeemer through the prophets, and then the incarnation at the Annunciation at the very bottom. The other side goes bottom to top again, but it ultimately creates a whole circle. You start with the baptism of Christ, then you go to the institution of the Eucharist at the Last Supper, and it culminates with the sending of the Holy Spirit. Let me see. How did I arrange these? Yes. So what we start with is this. This is mostly mahogany, but there's some exotic woods in here for the planets, and there's this white maple wood swish that represents the Holy Spirit. On the left, obviously, is creation. And so you've got the Holy Spirit, which 3 in 1 there. You've got various planets in the background. You've got nebulas and stuff. And then you can see, there we go. These are arranged. These are the Pleiades, okay? Because in Amos, there's a reference to the Pleiades and Orion. Earth here is part of North Africa, part of Europe, and part of North America. And it's also, with the waves, etc., it kind of comes up to be reminiscent of a whale. So the Spirit brings life upon the waters and creation, and God of the universe, God of the cosmos. This swish returns on the right side. No. This swish returns on the right side as the Holy Spirit coming upon the apostles and initiating a new creation through through the church. The flames that descend upon on the 12 apostles are reminiscent somewhat of the ancient ichthos symbol, the fish. There's a phrase from one of the church fathers: "We are little fish following the great fish," but it also represents the tongues of fire. In the course of doing this, I had come to realize that virtually all of the human images were male, and their associate pastor was a woman. I said, well, I think we need to get some women in here. So I had originally 3 apostles symbolizing the 12 and Mary. And the pastor was like, do we need Mary? I said, well, I explained my rationale. He said, yeah, some of my people have trouble with a sanctuary lamp, so let's do the Mary thing. I said, okay, so I said, I'll make 4 apostles. He said, well, why don't you make 12 apostles? I said, why don't I make 4 apostles? He said, oh, let's do all 12. I said, okay, if you're going to make me do all 12 apostles, and there are 12, you, darn it, I had to put me in right there as that apostle right there. So, yeah, if I'm going to do 12 people, one of them's going to be me. This is the creation panel. There's a couple of interesting stories about this. One of which is really cool, and the other one is bizarre, but it's relevant because it reflects how important it is to spend time contemplating an image. The individual who donated for this panel had not seen the design when she donated for it. All she knew was that it was going to be an image of creation. And when we finally got it up, she tracked me down and she said, "I want you to know that I donated for this panel as a memorial for my son." I said, "Well, that's beautiful." She said, "Well, that's not all." She said, "My son was an astrophysicist who worked with NASA." And I'm like, "Holy shoot, that could not have." And she said, she just once again, she was deeply moved by this incredible accident of fate that it wound up being this astronomical scene. The other story is about contemplating the image. About 4 years after I did these panels, I got a message. I think it was through Facebook, and the guy says, "Hey, we're all very eager to hear your explanation and discussion about the carvings at Trinity in Fayetteville." I said, "I thought I sent you all that information." So he had a link to a Facebook page, and I clicked it, and I found out real fast that this was not somebody from Fayetteville, North Carolina. This guy had done a huge amount of research on art and history and stuff, and had come to the conclusion that humanity had colonized Earth from somewhere out in space. And that this reality, this truth, so to speak, had been hidden, suppressed, except when it was collectively revealed periodically in history through certain individuals, which made me an instant guru in their group. And it got more bizarre. He had a lot of pictures that he considered justifying this, and mine was one. His theory was that humanity had colonized Earth in 3 different waves. Okay, so we've got the Holy Spirit there with the 3 fingers on it. Okay, so already we're off to an interesting start. The 3 waves came in a small wave. He saw that planet as representative of that. A medium-sized wave, he saw this planet as representative of that, and a large and final wave. And he really read a lot into that particular planet. And guess what constellation they came from? Yep, the Pleiades. So I spent a little time in their real culty little website, and at one point they had discovered things in this carving and others that I had no idea was there, and it was fitting together way too well. And I realized that I was starting to say, maybe this guy's got a point. But there for a while, I was a guru of a cult. I guess that lives a, I don't know. Anyway, let's look at these next set. We've seen the parallel of the top two with creation and recreation in the Holy Spirit. We have a figure on the left representing the prophets, not one prophet in particular. I was thinking of Isaiah a lot, but also Habakkuk because of is it Donatello's sculpture of Habakkuk on the Duomo in Florence. The Hebrew is from Isaiah. The divine name is in there 3 times, and is the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, etc. The opposite panel, of course, is the Last Supper, and it is the Greek from the 6th chapter of John's Gospel, the Bread of Life discourse. I love my prophet there. Also, if you go back to this one, the swish of the Holy Spirit becomes the scroll upon which the prophet is writing his promise of the Redeemer, etc. And this leads into this fabric that envelops Mary at the Annunciation. The Holy Spirit overshadows her. The angel of the Annunciation is obviously there on the left, designed to be a little atmospheric and not very particularly clear because this is kind of a divine vision. And on the right, you have the Holy Spirit at the baptism of Christ, represented, and it also represents the sacraments. So that is the end of my presentation. I hope that I have not gone over. And questions, comments, cries of anguish. Anybody?
No, you didn't go over, George. That was just great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I loved your use of different kinds of woods in there. I had no idea that woods could be so different from each other with the planets.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And even the same species of wood can look different depending on what tree it comes from, what part of the tree. And sometimes I spend as much time finding just the right piece of wood than more than I do even making the thing. Well, let's go back to this. For instance, the large planet there, I wanted to be a kind of a gas giant, kind of like Jupiter or Saturn or something. And so I spent a fair amount of time finding a piece of macrame that had this swirling grain pattern to it so that it would have that effect. The great white spot on the top is a reflection from the lights, but you get the idea.
Right.
So George, is it like Michelangelo that you know that's in the wood and you just have to peel everything else away, or do you occasionally find, oh, the wood has a flaw in it that now I have to make it something different?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. Michelangelo, I'm endlessly amused by Michelangelo. By the time that the story came that he was releasing the figure, he was promoting his own legend. If you look at his work, it does look like he does that. But if you look at it close, he's actually sketching and then carving, making his sketch become 3-dimensional as he carves back in it. He's just, in a lot of ways, really doing hyper deep relief. No, I don't look at the wood and say, oh, there's an angel in there. I look at the wood and say, well, that's a nice piece of wood. What am I going to do with it? And then 10 years later, it's still sitting there because I haven't found just the right project for it. It boils down to I get a concept, do a design, and then I start looking for the right wood for it. And sometimes I find a piece of wood that's, oh, I'm going to change the design a little bit to suit this particular piece of wood. So it winds up almost like, it's almost like working in clay and putting a puzzle together, the pieces of which weren't designed to fit together. So it's kind of it's an adventure going through the process. Does that answer any question?
I'd like to comment about this piece and the woman with the son that worked for NASA, that it looks like a womb with, you know, the big planet as the baby. And
Oh
so
my
there's
gosh.
maternal imagery in there too. And, you know, that's the great thing about art, right? Different people with different points of view can look at it and get something different out of it.
Holy shoot. Now I'm going to, that's now part of the symbolism here.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I mean back there about contemplative aspect of it. I love hearing what other people see that it never occurred to me was in there. And I never saw that until just now. And now I can't unsee it. So yeah, it's like the oh, that's beautiful. That is really beautiful. Thank you.
Just a technical question. Does the maple wood stay white like that, or does it get darker over time?
It will darken over time. It'll never do different woods will darken at different rates and depth. Maple will get sort of a richer, almost amber tone to it, but it won't change as much as, say, cherry, which starts out as a nice pinkish color and can become almost black, depending on how much light gets to it over time. Um, and, you know, these are indoors, they're relatively protected from UV radiation and stuff, so they'll darken much more slowly than something that's going to be getting more direct light. But yeah, all wood darkens with time.
Mhm. Marilyn. Unmute, Marilyn.
Yeah. Okay. I love how you go beyond the borders. You know, I mean, it's fluid. You're not just stuck or bound by the shape of the wood. If you want
Yeah,
to carry it out, it goes beyond. I love that because some of them I've seen, you know, the hand is reaching beyond. I just think it's neat.
yeah. That's I I did that on that very first set of stations that I did, and I don't have a slide in here. I'd show it, but the thinking was the square in particular, represents creation. It represents the material world, whereas the circle with no beginning and end is in eternity and stuff. Well, the whole principle of these sacred mysteries is that they are an interaction and between the divine, which is beyond creation, and creation itself. And so my thinking has always been that it needs to have the frame broken in some way, so that you get that sense that this is something more than just the material world going on here. There's something transcendent, something divine that we connect with. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Well, it's like it's not contained, you know.
Exactly, it's not contained, and the mystery isn't contained. And no matter how much we see in this image, or these images, or in any image, no matter how much we see, no matter how much theology we bring to bear, no matter how much we think we understand, the reality is beyond.
Mhm.
It can't be contained in our human finitude. So, yeah, I like that.
Ken.
Yeah, very nice, George. Question, in these two different projects, did you have engagement with the congregations as part of the design process or programming, coming up with the themes for these different panels? What is your process like?
Okay, in these two particular cases, the interaction came through for Trinity here. The architect was a friend of mine, and he basically created this project so that we could work together. And he promoted it with the parish committee, and they ultimately went along with it. But it was the parish committee who generated the subjects that they wanted and what they were trying to say, not what they were trying to say. They just wanted the theme of the Trinity and these different biblical references. I had to fit everything else together, but I did go over there and I did meet with the building committee, the environment people, the pastor, the associate pastor, spent a few days just to get to know each other and things like that, which is the ideal. The one in El Dorado, I had gotten involved through a series of events that involved September 11th and a bunch of other stuff. And the pastor basically came up with a concept that he wanted to see incorporated into the doors. And that was the primary contact. Normally, I'd like to do a creative process with the parish where anybody who wants to show up shows up and everybody can contribute something. And I did a set of stations across that way one time. And this one woman, she saw the nativity. Well, where is it? She saw that nativity carving and she said, I want a baby in my station. And so her station wound up being Jesus meets his mother. So I carved the usual, Jesus meets his mother. And in the background is a woman holding a baby. So she was thrilled beyond words that I had managed to find a way to put a baby into her Station of the Cross. So you get things like that, but that's what I prefer doing. Doesn't always work out that way, but that's the ideal.
I have a part two. Have you had the opportunity to do any mystagogical reflection on these works with these communities? Like evenings of reflection or meditation, contemplation, anything like that?
Unfortunately, that almost never happens. And it's a real shame. I think that it goes for all of us across the board in liturgical art. If we had an opportunity to do an evening of mystagogy, do an evening where we talk about it and invite people to share their insights and experience, it would be an incredibly enriching experience. The interesting footnote to this is that the way I got involved in El Dorado was I had done some work for a parish in Little Rock, and we had scheduled an evening precisely doing what you just described. Okay. It just happened to fall on the evening of September the 11th, 2001. And as you might imagine, the whole event got canceled. And, but people still had publicity from it, and that led to this other project. So it's a shame that it doesn't happen more often than it does. But I get invited to lead retreats, and I do retreats and workshops and stuff where I do go into some of this stuff. This is probably the most focused session I've ever done on the symbolic. And see, we've discovered something new, with the idea that was a womb and conception there on the creation thing. So this is great. Yeah.
The big process of what do they call it? Visio Divina.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's
reading,
exactly right.
reflecting, sitting with, all those, sharing, all those things.
Yeah.
That'd be wonderful.
Does anybody else have a question or a comment? You
I
want
have a comment.
Go ahead.
I was wondering, do people touch these?
They
Do
can,
Go
and
ahead.
yes, they do sometimes. In fact,
And do you like that?
yes, I like that. I want people to interact with it. One of the best things, one of the things I enjoy most about, for instance, the statue of Saint Peter in Saint Peter's in Rome, is the foot of this bronze statue is worn to a shiny little point because centuries of people have been touching it. And there's a number of other images that I've seen over the years where people have interacted with it, and you can see that mark. And some people say, "Oh man, they're making it dirty," and I'm like, "No, man. If the person is moved to touch a piece, I don't care if it's a 2-year-old with sticky fingers, if they are so drawn to it that they want to physically interact with it, they should." Uh, and the mark of oil and stuff from people touching it repeatedly is just a sign of the image's power and ability to make present something beyond ourselves. One of the most meaningful moments for me, I did an icon of Mary and Joseph for Wheeling Jesuit University in Wheeling, West Virginia, a number of years ago. And about 4 years after they got it, I happened to be traveling through the area, and we stopped in to take a look and see how things were. And there was lipstick on this where people had kissing this icon. And I'm like, whoa, that's wow. You know, it's moments like that you step back and say, did I really do that? Or is something more going on here than just me, because I can't possibly have done that, you know? So yeah, interaction with the images, I think it's an important aspect of it.
Well, there's another aspect, and that is the visually impaired can come up and learn from it, to see what it is.
Oh man,
And
I hadn't thought of that.
it's really important, like we have some elderly sisters, and we have a creation, and that's what we had that in mind when we had it done. I mean, just think about how many people you can reach.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it becomes a conversation, like
Yes.
this is what
Yeah.
it is. I wonder if there couldn't be like a braille explanation on the side of the doors identifying what they are. That's just a thought, so that
Oh,
they
I
could,
like that.
yeah, so that they could identify it. But
Yeah.
it's really important. It's an important teaching vehicle,
Yeah.
actually.
Well, now we got two things that I'm going to talk about in the future. I hadn't thought about that, and you're right. Uh, the experience, the tactile experience.
hmm
Wow.
hmm Well, it's for both kids, especially, but also for the visually impaired.
Right. Right.
And it could be, as you have said, a prayer thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I've been thinking about in the last couple of years, several years, is yeah, we stand, we sit, we kneel. But you start looking at the way people interacted devotionally and liturgically in medieval churches. We don't have as much physical interaction with our building or the art as people did in the past. And I think that recovering some aspects of that would go a long way to us recovering our sense of the transcendent symbolism of people, places, and things. One of the lines in, I think it's in Built of Living Stones, as well as the old Environment, Art, and Catholic Worship, is a society that's geared toward manufacturing loses its sense of the symbolic function of people and things. And I think there's something really, really profoundly important about the medieval ability to see manifestations of God, manifestations of the divine, manifestations of the transcendent in the everyday. And it's just something I've been thinking about here in recent years. So anyway.
I have another question. This is a maintenance one. Do you advocate cleaning these with some kind of oil or something periodically?
These are finished with a type of catalyzed lacquer. There's a guy in Little Rock who does the finishing for me, and he uses a catalyzed lacquer, which is about as durable as anything gets. And other than a periodic dusting, they don't really require any maintenance. It's not like your old school furniture that had to be oiled and waxed and then re-waxed and oiled some more and things like this. I guess if enough people touch it over the years, they could wear through it, but you know, that'll be long after my time. So, but yeah, maintenance, that's another thing. Maintenance is deliberately intended to be as low as possible because I know only too well how basic maintenance goes in most parishes.
Yeah, really.
Well, thank you so much, George. This has been just great.
Oh,
Your
good.
talk was great and the questions were all great. I think we got a lot out of this. So thank you so much.
Well, thank y'all for having me do this. I enjoyed it.
It
So
was beautiful.
thank
Yeah.
you.